Hello everybody, TVI Tornado here, back with another video. And today we are going to be discussing Tournament 4, the States of Matter tournament. With a little bit of delay due to EU ICs, the tournament has started. So within this tournament, players were expected to bring one steel type, one water type, one poison type and one electric type. You only needed 4 Pokemon instead of 6. And you had to get your teams in by the weekend. In this tournament, we had banned the Ruin, Paradox and Legendary Pokemon, as well as a few additional Pokemon that shared 2 of the types that I mentioned earlier. These being the Magnemite line, the Varoom line, Quillfish, Rotom-Wash, Skrelp, the Mareanie line and the Toxel line. We also decided to ban Greninja's Protean ability. While Greninja is a water type, making it legible for this tournament, we found that Protean just allowed it to change its typings and diverge from the States of Matter. The same applies to the Terra typings. You must stick to either Steel, Water, Poison or Electric Terra type. And as always, Pokemon will be set to level 50 with no duplicate Pokemon or held items. Egg and tutor moves are allowed, as well as no restrictions to the EVs, IVs or Natures. And then finally, any inactivity or lack of interest to organise games will result in a disqualification as a worst case scenario. On screen now is an analysis and statistics breakdown of everything you need to know about Tournament 4. Starting off with typings, besides the main 4, we have 10 flying types, 8 grass types, 7 fighting types, 4 dark types, 4 fire types, 3 bug types, 3 fairy types, 3 ghost types, 3 ground types and 1 rock type. There were no dragon, ice or normal types, which is very interesting because they were available options. So for whatever reason, these 3 typings just weren't used. Additionally, 10 out of the 56 Pokemon were monotypes, whereas the rest at 46 were duo-typed. In terms of duplicate Pokemon, there are a lot of Amoonguss. Out of 14 trainers, half of them were using one on their team. And then behind Amoonguss, there were 4 players that used Palafin. Up next, we have 2 regional birds in Corviknight and Kilowattrel at 3 apiece, as well as Rotom Heat and Tinkaton, who are also used by 3 players. Bellibolt, Lucario, Gastrodon, Goldengo, Gyarados, Kingambit, Pachirisu, Pawmot, Paldean Tauros and Scizor each had 2 trainers. Some were fairly obvious picks in things such as Rotom and Gyarados, whereas others were quite interesting in things such as Bellibolt and Pachirisu. Now these Pokemon were ones I thought trainers would use, but for whatever reason they decided against it. The steel types being Fortress, Bronzong, Orthworm, the water types being Azumarill, Dreadnought and Dondozo, the poison types being Muck, Toxicroak and Grafaiai, and the electric types being Raichu, Luxray and Pinchurchin. There are other options that I don't have time to cover in this video, but just know that there were a lot of unchosen Pokemon. Moving on to the trivia section, 6 out of 12 steel types were chosen, 9 out of 28 water types were chosen, 8 out of 13 poison types were chosen, and 7 out of 17 electric types were chosen. 11 out of the 56 Pokemon don't evolve, 32 out of the 56 Pokemon are from a 2-stage line, and 13 out of 56 are Pokemon from a 3-stage line. In this tournament, Gyarados was the tallest and heaviest Pokemon, while Rotom is the shortest and lightest Pokemon. In terms of previous tournaments, 9 Pokemon have made a return from Tournament 1, while 15 haven't. In terms of Tournament 2, 14 Pokemon have made a return, whereas 52 haven't. And in terms of Tournament 3, 10 Pokemon have made a return, where 39 haven't. And since Tournament 1, the only 3 Pokemon that have been used by at least one trainer are Quaquaval, Pawmot and Goldengo. And then finally, in terms of generations, 5 Generation 1 Pokemon are used, 2 Generation 2 Pokemon are used, 2 Generation 3 Pokemon are used, 10 Generation 4 Pokemon are used, 8 Generation 5 Pokemon are used, 1 Generation 6 Pokemon is used, 2 Gen 7 Pokemon are used, 3 Generation 8 Pokemon are used, and finally 22 Generation 9 Pokemon were used. Out of all the available Generation 1 Pokemon, 16 are yet to debut in our tournaments, 18 from Generation 2, 16 from Generation 3, 15 from Generation 4, 13 from Generation 5, 9 from Generation 6, 14 from Generation 7, 16 from Generation 8, and 15 from Generation 9. So as the tournaments progress through Tournament 5, 6, 7, 8, we should see a reduction in these numbers. And it'll be interesting to see which Pokemon people use. We'll be going on to Mariland so I can judge a team defensively, but I'll mainly be focusing on how defensive they are against opposing steel, water, poison or electric attacks. I will be ranking these teams out of 10, so stick around to the end of the video to see those. I'll rank them on how offensive and defensive they are, how much support and utility you get out of the team, as well as how much coverage the team provides. Also at the end of the video, I'll be going over each team's base stat total from first place to last place, to see if they have an effect on their overall performance. So starting off, we have TVI Secretary Sarah's team. Sarah has yet again gone above and beyond with these trainer cards, turning something quite simple with the 4 Pokemon layout, as well as the inclusion of the 4 States of Matter, into something presentable and quite straightforward. So thank you Sarah for yet again making really amazing trainer cards. So you've opted for Scizor, which gives you a ×4 weakness to fire, but then you've got Gyarados there that can take the hits quite nicely. You shouldn't have to worry too much about fire types unless the opponent has a Heat Rotom, but you've opted for the Rotom. Rotom gives you access to Leaf Storm, which can really punish the opponents that are using water and ground types such as Gastrodon. It also gives you a quad resistance to electric, which will help the Gyarados out quite nicely with a nice switch in. And then you run it at the team with the interesting choice in Seviper. Seviper does give you the expected ground and psychic weakness. However, with 2 immunities to ground, you should be good. I imagine Sizzle has Technician for those really powerful bullet punches, and Gyarados could be very aggressive with Moxie, stacking up the attack boosts, or it could be on the more supportive role and have Intimidate to lower the opponent's attack. Rotom also gets great utility with things such as Thunder Wave and Will-O-Wisp, so I can definitely see a scenario where in certain games you get the advantage purely down to what moves you're giving these Pokemon. Dashin is next, and he's also gone for Scizor, but he's also gone for Amoonguss as well, so he's got 2 Pokemon with a fire weakness. However, with Greninja and Heat Rotom there, fire isn't the main concern. Your main worry would come from a rock type attack, but with a steel, water and grass type, you really shouldn't have to worry. With Greninja, despite its many weaknesses, it does also get access to a lot of different moves, so you've got a lot of versatility when it comes to swapping out movesets for different opponents. With the Dark typing, you do give Amoonguss a comfortable switch in if you are predicting a Psychic type move from the opponent. Amoonguss does also get a Flying and Ice weakness. Ice is checked by every one of your other teammates, whereas Flying is only really covered by Rotom. So if you are going to be using statusy moves, just make sure you've got enough bulk to take the hits. I can see Greninja and Rotom being your fast heavy hitters, quite versatile offensive pressure that could definitely catch an opponent off if they're not expecting the speed. Overheat is a great counter to any steel types that the opponents will be using, as well as any Amoonguss that will try and pop up and cause havoc. And then with Scizor, I can see it wrapping up games. Maybe you've got your opponents down to yellow or red health and a nice bullet punch or 2 will finish the job. Toby, welcome to the group. I recruited you from the internationals, and within the space of 3 days, you put together this amazing team. You've gone for Tinkaton, Vaporeon, Skuntank and Bellibolt. It does give you 3 weaknesses to ground, but that was to be expected from a tournament that restricts you to steel, poison and electric types. Besides that though, this team is very defensive with only weaknesses coming from Tinkaton's fire and Vaporeon's electric and grass. So while you do have a lot of resisted and neutral hits coming your way, you might have to consider using an air balloon to get rid of one of those ground weaknesses. Bellibolt is a very interesting bulky option. It can set up electric terrain and paired with its electromorphosis ability can just deal massive electric damage. Skuntank is a prime candidate for the air balloon, as well as getting access to Flamethrower, which can put the steel types in danger. If not Flamethrower, then a nice ground type move in Dig would do the job. Speaking of steel types, you do have the infamous Tinkaton there. It gives you the fairy typing, which can give you the edge against certain matchups, as well as getting great utility moves in things such as Thunder Wave and Screens. However, if you want to go all out attack with Gigaton Hammer and play rough, then be my guest. And then finally, you've got a very bulky option in Vaporeon. I've given it the water absorbability in case you're anticipating other opponents' water type moves. And without the threat of any grass types besides maybe Amoonguss and Rotom, you should be able to prolong a game and really take advantage of Vaporeon's bally nature. Kieran Johnson, the notorious Quaquaval user, has given this dancing duck the teammates in King Gambit, Clodsire and Kilowattrel. Quaquaval is very underrated in that its signature move allows it to increase its speed stat, as well as its hidden ability that allows it to increase its attack stat. I imagine in this tournament specifically, it will do great damage to the opposing Pokemon, as well as being paired with King Gambit, which can also do great damage. King Gambit helps out with Quaquaval's grass, flying and psychic weakness, as well as providing great defensive coverage to Clodsire and Kilowattrel. But where there's offense, there's also defense, and that defense comes in the form of Clodsire. Clodsire is a very bulky special wall, being able to toxic stall the opponents as well as putting them to sleep with Yawn. And being a ground type with 2 immunities, it's able to sit there and take the hits as well as provide great ground damage to the opposing steel, poison and electric types. Electric types that don't have to worry about this though is Kilowattrel, and you have one on your team. Kilowattrel is a great candidate for setting up Tailwind, and while I've given this one Volt Absorb to take in the electric attacks, there's nothing stopping you from setting this up with Wind Power and just going crazy. Shiny Man Java is next, and you've gone for Lucario, which is interesting. It does give you a risky fire, fighting and ground weakness. However, with great physical and special offense, Lucario could be a wild card on your team. The Sluglord herself, Gastrodon, is there, sporting only a Time Sword weakness to grass. However, this is checked by all 3 of your teammates, which is quite nice. And in return, Gastrodon's ground and water typing supports Lucario's fire and ground weakness quite nicely, as well as being able to support Rotom Heat and Slazzle really nicely against the rock type attackers. And with Storm Drain possibly, it can also suck up the water type attacks that puts them in danger. Speaking of Slazzle and Rotom, they both provide great firepower for the opposing steel types. And with a Time Sword weakness to ground paired with Levitate, these Pokemon go together hand in hand. Slazzle is also known for its great speed and great special attack, so while Rotom is most likely going to be the trickier option, Slazzle and most likely Lucario are definitely going to be your damage dealers. Unless of course you want to play Toxic Stall with Slazzle's corrosion ability. Poison a few opponents, stall out the game with Gastrodon, and at the end you just deal the last remaining damage with Rotom and Lucario. Another Rotom Heat, but on Jigsaw's team. However, he's opted for Gholdengo, Palafin and Amoonguss as his support options. I like how you've gone for the ghost typing in Gholdengo to let out a lot of special offense, while Palafin lets out a lot of physical offense. And then you've rounded out the team quite nicely with a bulky option of Amoonguss, which can provide great support with things like Sport and Rage Powder. This is definitely looking like more of an aggressive team, especially seeing how there's quite a few weaknesses dotted around on the defensive coverage. Palafin and Amoonguss are covered quite nicely, whereas Rotom and Gholdengo are looking quite susceptible to damage. The way around this, I suppose, would come from Amoonguss's Rage Powder. Maybe you can redirect an attack that would otherwise knock you out and just take the hit. Another option would be to utilise Rotom's bulk and maybe use Will-O-Wisp to reduce the physical offense. The nice thing about Rotom as well is you can give it a Choice Scarf and trick it onto the opponent. So while dealing that crazy damage with Palafin and Gholdengo, if you come up against a formidable foe that can take the damage, then Rotom can just sit there and give it a Choice Scarf, blocking it into one move. Spidermark86 next, and he's gone for a very interesting team of Lucario, Gyarados, Gengar and Pachirisu. Lucario, like I mentioned earlier, does provide great physical or special damage, as well as having a nice speed stat. Gyarados is there, providing your only coverage to the otherwise 3 ground weaknesses, in exchange for a rock weakness and a times 4 electric weakness, which is only really covered by Pachirisu's ability if you've given it Volt Absorb. And it's really interesting you've gone with Pachirisu. Someone of your calibre, I'd imagine, would have had something that had a bit more firepower, but to go with Pachirisu as a support option maybe is something that players should definitely keep an eye on. However, something that's definitely more up your alley is the inclusion of Gengar. Gengar is one of your ace Pokemon as seen in many previous tournaments, and who can blame you when it gets access to so many different types of moves? Not to mention its crazy special attack and speed stat that will definitely put a dent in your opponent's team. Defensively, you're looking really good. You've only really got that ground weakness like I mentioned earlier. With some decent switch-ins, you should be able to resist some damage. Similar to some other teams, this is looking like a very aggressive team. I can definitely see Lucario, Gyarados and Gengar putting in the work, with maybe Pachirisu there as a support option. Moving on to Jay Sharona's team, you've gone for a very similar one to Jigsaw's, the only difference is Belly Bolt, so I won't repeat myself too much. As you can see on screen, there are 2 fire and ground weaknesses, but besides that, everything else is looking quite good. I can definitely see this being the more slow and steady game. You'll need a turn or 2 to set up Palafin into its hero form, which you can get support from Belly Bolt and Amoonguss. Maybe Gholdengo and Palafin need redirection from Amoonguss so they can set up Nasty Plot and bulk up. Or if you're feeling brave, have Belly Bolt be your attacker, and then once you get hit with Electromorphosis, just go crazy with your electric type attacks. The only thing I'd worry about this team is if you were to set up Electric Terrain, then Amoonguss would have no chance at setting up Spore, because Electric Terrain will prevent any sleep. Gholdengo being a Steel and Ghost type provides you with a lot of immunities and resistances, but everything else in your team is going to be taking a lot of neutral damage. So while you're up there as one of the more aggressive teams, defensively it's not looking the greatest, but I guess that's why they say the best defense is a great offense. Next we have Samps. I had the pleasure of battling this guy at the EUIC competition. He had a very great team there, and he's got a very great team now, sporting the likes of Corviknight, Tauros, Amoonguss and Pawmot. Corviknight gives you great bulk and only gives you a fire and electric weakness. While you've got a lot of resistances, which is brilliant, it is interesting how you've gone for a steel type that's weak to electric, knowing that electric types are part of this tournament. Amoonguss is a nice staple to the team. Maybe it's got a grass type move to deal with the water types, but you've gone for 2 fighting types in Tauros and Pawmot, which on paper works really well for this tournament, seeing how you've got steel types to deal with, but it does give you psychic and fairy weaknesses, which if it wasn't for your teammates would cause you a lot of issues. Don't get me wrong though, Tauros is a great addition to the team. Priority Aqua Jet is always nice, and Raging Bull just gives you that niche to take down opponents' reflects and light screens. And if it does have Intimidate, then the opposing physical attackers are definitely going to struggle. And then with Pawmot, Double Shock is a really powerful signature move that only increases in power if you terrestrialize into an electric type. Plus you get priority Mach Punch as well as Fire Punch and Ice Punch if you're running Iron Fists as an ability. Not to mention the game changing move in Revival Blessing, which can really turn a game on its head. Just be really careful for those psychic and flying moves and you should be okay. Next we have Wizzy's team. Wizzy is one of my favourite people to battle, and with a team as unpredictable as this, who can blame me? You've got the really strong King Gambit sitting there. It does give you a times 4 weakness to fighting, but with Venomoth you've got a times 4 resistance, as well as the flying type in Oricorio, which also helps out its ground weakness. Basculin is there with only an electric and grass weakness, and it does help out with your 2 fire weaknesses, especially if this thing gets adaptability, which makes its water type moves be double damage. Or it could have Rockhead, which will do massive damage with any recoil attacks. Venomoth is such an interesting choice, being able to support the team. It does however have a fire, flying, psychic and rock weakness, so if I were you, I'd try putting your opponents to sleep with Sleep Powder, or maybe even paralysing them with Stun Spore. And then moving over to Oricorio, rather than Kilowattrel or Rotom, you've gone for the Pokemon with the Dancer ability. This means if King Gambit has Swords Dance or Venomoth has Quiver Dance, then Oricorio is going to get a massive buff by copying that same move. Therefore, after one turn, you've either got a really physical Oricorio or a really special Oricorio that can just get the one-shot hits left, right and centre. Next, we have Bruised Octopus's team. You've gone for a very bulky team with Corviknight, Gastrodon, Amoonguss and Pawmot. Corviknight and Pawmot seem to be your heavy hitters, while Gastrodon and Amoonguss will sit back and take the hits. They definitely seem to be the ones to support the team. Maybe they'll help Corviknight set up a Bulk Up or Iron Defense, or maybe they'll redirect so that Pawmot can use Rival Blessing. Yeah, this is definitely looking like a team that can go into a prolonged game and come out victorious. It'll all come down to what movesets you've given them, as well as what held items they have. You do need to look out for Fire and Psychic mainly. Also, these Pokemon take a lot of neutral damage, so be really careful when you come up against a Pokemon that will throw a surprise move at you. Any one of these Pokemon would make for a great Terastallization option. Corviknight could tear it into a Water type to get rid of its Fire weakness, and Gastrodon could tear it into a Poison type to get rid of its times 4 Grass weakness. Amoonguss could also tear it into a Water type to get rid of its Fire weakness, and while Pawmot could Terastallize into an Electric type to make use of its Double Shock, if you really wanted to throw your opponents off, you could give this thing Terra Blast and make this a Steel, Water or Poison Terror. We've got my team next, so we won't go over it too much, but I have gone for Tinkaton, Palafin, Amoonguss and Kilowattrel. I do have 2 Fire weaknesses, which is covered by Palafin, and Palafin also covers for my 2 Ice weaknesses, which Tinkaton also helps out with. Tinkaton does also give me a lot of resistances and immunities, however it is weak to Fire and Ground. Amoonguss is there just to support the team as usual. However, if I've got a trick up my sleeve, I'm not going to reveal it here. And then finally we have Kilowattrel, which if I've given Volt Absorb can help out Palafin, as well as the Flying typing helping out with the aforementioned Ground weakness. Not to mention that Tailwind could come in clutch, and the Electric and Flying type moves coming from this thing will take out a lot of the opposing Water and Grass types. Moving on to Imadudis now, and he's got a very unusual team. He's gone for your standard Corviknight and Paldean Tauros. However, he's opted for Glimmora as his poison option. This adds the rock typing to his team, which could work really well offensively, but defensively it just gives you additional weaknesses, especially in water and steel, which is very present in this tournament. So while you do get a lot of coverage in moves such as Power Gem, Sludge Bomb, Energy Ball and Earth Power, you are playing it very risky by having all those weaknesses. But who knows, maybe you're playing the toxic games and you want to set up some toxic spikes to allow the rest of your team to get the late knockouts. And then you've also gone for Pachirisu, which was very surprising the first time, but seeing it twice in a tournament is just crazy. I highly doubt this will be the offensive threat on your team, so if you've also got a crazy strategy to work Pachirisu into your team, then all the best to you. I can only imagine which kind of crazy strategies you've gone for with this team, especially seeing how you've got 2 electric weaknesses, 2 ground weaknesses and 2 psychic weaknesses, with a lot of neutral hits coming your way. And then finally, we have 15 Luap 09's team. He's gone for the classic Amoonguss, but he's paired it with Tinkaton, Kilowattrel and our new entry, Pelipper. While there are 2 weaknesses to fire with Tinkaton and Amoonguss, Pelipper's Drizzle ability will set the rain up, which will halve the damage from any fire type attacks. Not to mention that the rain will help Pelipper out immensely. It will increase the power of Hydro Pump, and it will make sure that Hurricane hits 100% of the time. This has really great synergy with Kilowattrel too, because it also gets Hurricane, but then it also pairs well with Thunder, which is 110 power and will never miss in the rain. So in fact, the rain works really well with every single one of the Pokemon on this team. All you have to do is support really well with Amoonguss, utilise some great utility from Tinkaton, set up some screens maybe, or even set up some Stealth Rocks, and then let the 2 birds do all the rest. So good luck to everyone taking part. I wish you all the best. Can't wait to see what kind of crazy strategies you will come up with and what battles we get to see. Let's move on to the base stat totals and the total rankings before wrapping up this video. In 13th place, we have 15 Luapo 9 with 1900 base stat total. In 12th place, we have Imadudis with 1915 base stat total. And 11th place is myself with a base stat total of 1917. In 10th place, we have Bruised Octopus with 1924 base stat total. In 9th place, we have Wizzy with a base stat total of 1936. In 8th place, we have Samps with a base stat total of 1939. In 7th place, we have Jay Sharona with 1966 base stat total. And in 6th place, we have Spidermark 86 with a base stat total of 1970. In 5th place, just missing out on the 2000s, we have Jigsaw at 1991 base stat total. Shiny Javo reaches 2000 with a base stat total of 2000, as well as Kieran Johnson with a base stat total of 2000. Toby comes into 3rd place with a base stat total of 2005. Dashan comes in 2nd with a base stat total of 2014. And in 1st place is TVI Secretary Sarah with a grand total of 2018 base stat total. So big shout outs to TVI Secretary Sarah for not only getting the highest base stat total of 2018, but also for getting the highest attack stat of 420, as well as the highest special defense stat of 347. Congrats to Toby for getting the highest HP stat of 427, as well as Imadudis for getting the highest defense stat of 370, Shiny Man Javo for getting the highest special attack stat of 426, and Spidermark86 for getting the highest speed stat of 376. Sarah gets 7.7 out of 10, great offensively and defensively, could just do with a bit more coverage. Dashlin gets a 7.8 out of 10, similar to Sarah, it's very offensive and defensive, however besides Greninja, the coverage isn't there. Toby gets an 8 out of 10, it's a very bulky defensive team with great utility options. It just slightly underperforms in the offensive side. Kieran Johnson gets a 7.6 out of 10. Besides maybe Tailwind, there isn't much support. However, it's a very aggressive team that's also quite bulky. Shiny Man Javo gets a solid 8 out of 10. It's a well-rounded team that checks for each other's strengths and weaknesses. Jigsaw also gets a solid 8 out of 10. It's a very aggressive team, and it also has enough bulk to take a few hits. Spidermark86's team gets a 7.7 out of 10. It's fairly flimsy, but it should be okay with enough support and utility. Jay Sharona gets a 7.7 out of 10, an all-round decent team just shy of an 8. Samps gets an 8 out of 10 for really great utility and not too bad on the offensive and defensive side. Wizzy gets a 7.6 out of 10, a very unexpected team with great potential, it just feels a little frail. Bruised Octopus gets an 8.2 out of 10. Amazing bulk with great support and utility. However, besides Pawmot, it's lacking in the offensive department. My team gets an 8 out of 10. Amazing utility from each option. However, they're very restricted in which coverage moves they get. Imadudis gets a 7.6 out of 10, mainly for Glimora bringing down its defences, adding additional water and steel weaknesses where it could have been avoided. And then 15 Luapo 9 gets a 7.9 out of 10. It has amazing utility and really great support, just a little reliant on rain for damage. So there we have it. Another tournament is underway and another set of trainer cards have been analysed. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, comment and subscribe. Once more, good luck to every single person taking part in this tournament. And until next time, I've been TVI Tornado. Train hard, team build to the best of your abilities. I'll catch you guys later.